there was this day I was sitting in my apartment in downtown LA all alone
Yeah.
and felt very empty and lost.
Mm.
And I just said a simple prayer. I just remember I the thing that I really remember is my brothers and I were roommates and we had bought this Costco clock and they had the second hand that was just kind of ticking this 1 second at a time going around. And I was staring at it and I was feeling really low. And I just thought, man, every second of my life is just passing me by. And I
Yeah.
just had this in this moment, I just went, God, I don't know if you want anything to do with me.
Mm.
I've kind of been running away from you and I'm kind of making a mess of my life, but I miss you. That's all I said. I
Mm.
miss you.
Mm.
And that is when God goes, okay, I've been here all along. I just needed you to say that. And and he came back into my life in a very powerful and real way. And it became and that from that point forward at 22 years old, 23 years old, I it became very real to me and I never looked back.
Hi, welcome to I'd Rather Be a Buffalo. My name is Kevin Gregg. This is a show that's about getting through your life storms with Christ, help deepen your relationship with God, and trying to find out more about what God's purpose is for your life. You know, my partner and friend on this show, Doug Riggle, he passed away. He passed away back in October, and so as I'm moving forward with the show and with our project, there's a couple of things that came to mind for myself. Was part of the thing that Doug and I always talked about was about we wanted to make sure that we were reaching out and trying to continue to help you, the listener, as you're going through some stuff, particularly leaning into Jesus. And one of the plans that Doug and I had was originally we were going to start interviewing and talking to people. Well, after everything had happened with Doug passing on, there was somebody that popped immediately into my mind that I wanted to have on the show because he's gone through his challenges as well. When you see him on here, Eric Close, who's going to be right here with us, he is an actor and director. You may know him from such shows as Without a Trace, Nashville. You've probably seen him on Suits. He was actually recently in the movie Average Joe that's playing now at the time that you're seeing this. He's got a Hallmark movie that's coming out that we're going to talk about that. But more importantly, he's a friend and a brother in Christ. And I wanted to have him on the show as we delved in some challenges that he's faced. Welcome to the show, Eric Close.
Thanks, Kevin. It's good to see you, man.
Good to see you, buddy. Eric, you just popped in my head immediately because first and foremost, we actually became friends because you and our mutual friend, Charles Eston, Chip Eston, had invited you to a men's Bible study while you guys were filming Nashville together. And you happened to pop by. And over the years, we have we've become dear friends because of this, just sort of like sharing our faith. And man, there's some there's some definitely challenges and things like that that have gone through your life. Can I ask you this first and foremost? Um, your relationship with Christ. I'm just getting right to the meat and potatoes, right? It's like
Yeah.
forget about the acting stuff.
Let's jump right into the most important thing.
Let's get into the most important thing. But and we've talked about it a little bit before, and I'm sure that you've probably shared it in other interviews or other talks and stuff that you've had. How the heck does a guy that's involved in acting and TV and movies and all this stuff, how'd you get your relationship with Christ, man?
So when I was 13 and my parents had sent me to a private school in San Diego, I grew that's where I was raised. And from 8 years on, we moved there. And in my seventh grade year was when junior high started, and they sent me there. And it was a Christian school, and I was invited to like I guess we used to call them assemblies, where you'd gather in in the theater or whatever,
Sure.
and have a guest speaker. And I, I can visualize it today. I remember standing in the kind of mid crowd, and this guy gave this talk about Jesus and who he was, and the importance of knowing him personally and accepting him as your savior, asking for forgiveness, for our things our sins. And I remember hearing this, and the thing that really connected with me is this was the early 80s. And, we grew up in a time where, racial slurs were thrown around quite easily, and,
Sure.
and different things that it just never kind of sat well with me. I grew up in a family that was very loving to other people. My mom and dad, if anybody who knows them, are just incredibly welcoming people. And I remember hearing that Jesus loved everybody, didn't matter the color of their skin and, what they look like or any of that kind of stuff. He just loved everybody. And I remember thinking, in addition to all the other stuff, I thought I could follow somebody like that.
Mm.
Even at 13 years old, it just resonated with me. And so that's when I, made that, I said the prayer, it's like,
Yeah,
okay,
right.
God, come into my life.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I was at that point, I was young. I was emotionally young. I wasn't a mature person. And so while I wanted that in my life, I had a long path to go until it really became real to me.
Mm.
And so about a year later, just started, puberty hits and everything
Yeah,
just
right.
goes crazy. And I just kind of, being insecure and wanting to fit in and all that, wanting people's approval, I kind of walked away from that in the sense and wanted to try and, I succumbed to peer pressure and all that, and try to fit in with the popular people or whatever.
Right.
Back then, you don't realize that everybody's insecure and everybody's trying to,
Totally.
put on, yeah, everybody's got their thing. But I really wanted to fit in. And so I, walked away from God for a while, not intentionally. I just wasn't thinking,
Yeah.
but he was always with me.
Yeah.
I will tell you that. And there's this
And a very
scripture.
and a very and a very similar journey, man. Like, I mean, very similar thing for me, having been raised. And I was raised in the church, raised in the Catholic Church, and had gone through all that stuff. And especially when you get into those teen years, right, as you're discovering who you are as a man, as a young man. And you're right, it's like all of that other stuff comes on, right? Like, your
That's a
focus.
common story, right?
Yeah, totally. You're just like focused on, like, girls and the things that you're trying to do, and it's like you just don't have time for any of that other stuff. It kind of falls to the wayside.
Yeah. And I have good parents, and I came from a pretty. I mean, my family had dysfunction, but I knew I had loving parents, but I was just kind of a wild kid, a lot of ADD, ADHD, whatever you want to call it. I was
Gosh.
bouncing off the walls and had a lot of energy, and I had to put it somewhere. And so I was a bit reckless. There's people who knew me back then, but anyway, when I graduated college and got out into the real world, I remember I just spoke at a group in San Diego a couple weeks ago, and I told them that there was this day I was sitting in my apartment in downtown LA all alone
Yeah.
and felt very empty and lost.
Mm.
And I just said a simple prayer. I just remember I the thing that I really remember is my brothers and I were roommates, and we had bought this Costco clock, and they had the second hand that was just kind of ticking this 1 second at a time going around. And I was staring at it, and I was feeling really low. And I just thought, man, every second of my life is just passing me by. And I just had this, in this moment, I just went, God, I don't know if you want anything to do with me.
Mm.
I've kind of been running away from you, and I'm kind of making a mess of my life, but I miss you. That's all I said. I
Mm.
miss you.
Mm.
And that is when God goes, okay, I've been here all along. I just needed you to say that. And and he came back into my life in a very powerful and real way. And it became, and that from that point forward, at 22 years old, 23 years old, I it became very real to me, and I never looked back.
Was it also at that time, at 22, having that experience, did that also then serve as a push for you to start, like, seeking a church or seeking fellowship with other people, or do you have any other examples of people to go through this process with?
Yeah, that's a great question, Kevin. One of the things I can tell you is that during that 8 year period where I wasn't walking with the Lord intentionally, I was, I still had a longing in my heart. I remember there were times like on the campus at USC, I'd be walking across campus, and there was a church, there was a sanctuary on the USC campus. And I remember walking up to the door and looking at it, going, having this desire to go in, like I was missing something. And then some of the guys in my fraternity were actually having Campus Crusade for Christ meetings in my fraternity. And I remember being a longing to go in there, but thinking, oh, what are my other bros going to think? That kind of
Right.
And so there was this longing for that fellowship.
Yeah.
Um, and so when this at age 22, 23 happened, not long after I said that prayer, I ended up getting a lead in a play. And I met a guy in that play who had been a Muslim who lost his Quran. And so his next door neighbor was a Christian and loaned him his Bible because he wanted to stay in the scriptures.
Yeah, right.
And so he started reading the Bible and he came to Christ through the reading the Bible. And so I asked him if he went to church, and he said he did. And I said, yeah, I want to go back to church. I haven't been to church in a long time. And I said, can I go with you? And he said, yeah, we got to come with an open mind. And I teased him. I said, what are you guys all passing rattlesnakes around or something? He laughed. He says, no, you just need to come with an open mind. And what he meant by that is when I realized when I got there, I was the only white guy.
Yeah, yeah, sure.
It was all African American church.
Yeah,
so when I walked in there, I was kind of like, wow, this is I'm like I'm the Colonel of Salt and the Pepper Shaker. And 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 they welcomed me with such open arms, and that was the beginning of the true real foundation of my faith was in that church for 5 years.
Wow.
My brothers both got saved and baptized there. My parents
Really?
Yeah, my parents came to Christ through that, experience. And so anyway, very cool. But I needed, like you said, I needed that fellowship. And that's what I spoke about last couple of weeks ago to the men's group. I was talking about we can't do this life alone, and that's why our Friday Bible study has been so valuable and important in all of our lives. And I'm grateful to Chip for inviting me into that.
Well, it's crazy because Chip and then also our other friends, David Burke and John Crane, those guys had started that together. They had been doing it for a while because they had been meeting. And I remember David invited me to that. And I will tell you, I'm trying to think how old I was because we've been doing it for a while. I may have been in my late 30s going into my 40s at the time. I'm 52 now. But I remember because first of all, I was teaching at our local church. I was teaching for junior high kids to help out with their as they're getting ready for their sacraments. And David's son was also going at the same time as my son was, Maddie and Charlie. They're both around the same age.
Yeah.
And David was starting to attend at that time. And David was the one who kind of said, hey, we kind of do this thing. Would you be interested in going? And I remember, showing up. And it was honestly, Eric, I will tell you, it's the first time with David and Chip and then John and then ultimately meeting you and all the other guys that we've had in that group. It was the first time that I got exposed to male Christian friendship fellowship ever, really, in my life. I'd had a lot, I'd had people that were sort of like acquaintances and stuff, or I'd have people that I worked with at work, but it was the first time that I was finally around like other believing men, right? Like other believing men. And I'll tell you, it was it was like something unlocked for me because obviously, challenges and struggles I've gone through over the last several years were just being able to go in and to be able to talk with guys that were coming from a perspective of what they know is supposed to be happening, right? It's one thing when you be having, challenges that would happen in your family or work or all this stuff, and you're around people that are in the world and everybody wants to gripe and grumble and do all this stuff. It's another thing to be doing it around other men who are going, totally get it. Hey, let's pray. Or what do you need? Or reach out like that, or a text or something like that. And I'll tell you, it was a brand new experience for me to be able to do that and to just go, oh, I get it. God, this is like the biggest gift that you could have ever given me in my life. Like, not that the relationship that I have with my wife, Kate, is like deep and true. And I'm so grateful for that. But there's another layer that happens when you're hanging around other people and having that fellowship that I think that we need as men, as married men, as leaders in our families, that we kind of need to be getting that support from other guys to help us so that we've got, that tools and those other things that we need that we can bring in, that we can lead and support our families, So
no, I agree. It's vital. And because we know that we see it throughout the world, throughout history, that people are looking for that meaning, that to fill an emptiness. Some people call it the God hole in your soul, right? That There's an emptiness, and it really, let's just say what that is because we were created in God's image. He wants to be in a relationship with us. God is real. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of put him in some sort of box, and he becomes this sort of cartoon character, and he's not. He's so much more. God is this being is so much more than sometimes what we comprehend. And God wants to be in this relationship with us. And when people don't know that or how to attain that, it's so easy for us to seek meaning through so many other things, or intimacy through things that really don't bring you intimacy, or alcohol, drugs, money, working all the time, working out all the time. I mean, there's so many things that the world throws at us. And if you live long enough, you start to get to a point where you go, man, I've done all the things that I thought would make me happy. I've gone on these great vacations, or I've done this and that, and I still have this emptiness. What is it? And that's God just saying, come and see. It's
Yes.
like, come and see what I have to offer. Does not mean that life isn't hard.
Yes.
Life, yeah, the biggest lie is when people think, oh, if I give my faith and my life to God, life's gonna be great. I made that joke a couple weeks ago. I told them my testimony, how I said that prayer, and I said, and after I said that prayer, everything went great, and I've never had another problem in my life. And they all started laughing. I said, "Oh, you guys had the same experience, right? When you came to Christ, it's been awesome." There's, no, and it's not even the case. But whether you're following the Lord or not, life is hard. It's full of hardship, and it's blessings and burdens, blessings and battles. And I just can't imagine going through this life without a relationship with God. And you know, the other thing about it is it gives you hope. It gives you hope that, like when you lose somebody or you lose a job, it's just there's this eternal hope that you have,
Yes.
that even within this difficult time, you still have something that you can grasp onto.
Well, this is the interesting thing. It's a great transition that I want to bring us up to. And actually, something had popped in my mind just as you were talking. My wife and I, we were rewatching Ken Burns' documentary about Ernest Hemingway, right? The writer Ernest Hemingway.
Mm-hmm.
And Hemingway had a pretty, kind of a worldly life and a lot of experiences that he had. I mean, it ended up leading to his suicide, but there's so many things that he was doing and always experiencing and looking, right? Like whether it was him being involved in World War I, or getting involved as a reporter in the Spanish Civil War, or then going back into World War II, or always chasing it, right? Chasing it with booze or women or all this other stuff that was there. And it's funny, as I was watching that documentary and hearing about some of his contemporaries that they were dealing with, and that thing that they're chasing, the first thing that goes through my mind is going, Jesus, man, like you're chasing God, you're chasing Jesus. You just don't realize it. Like you're chasing this thing. I need these experiences. I need this excitement, these hunting trips in Africa or Idaho or all this stuff, and going, yeah, I get it. You're chasing that thrill, that experience, whatever that thing is. And it's never going to be enough. It's never going to be enough until it's that ultimate thing that leads you with that peace. But to your point, like what you just talked about, Eric, is it's not puppy dogs and rainbows, right? When you get this, right? When you enter into this thing, but it gives you something that is able to help you through some of the hardships that you go through. You experienced this over the last few years. Tell us about your brother Christopher with the challenge that you get, and why it's so poignant. Why I wanted to bring you on, especially in light of Doug's passing, my partner on the show. Share, if you don't mind.
Yeah, the first experience that I really had, the first experience I did have losing someone, was my grandfather, who I was really close with. And I was in my early 20s. I was living in LA. And I remember I had not come back to my relationship with Christ. And so but I remember just praying over him in the hospital, just begging God, please take him to heaven. Please take him to heaven. I remember just, just that was like so important to me. And then, for a long time, I didn't really experience anything, got married, and life was great and all this. And then my wife's mom got sick, and my brother, actually, Christopher, who you brought up, he was my younger brother. I have two younger brothers, but he was my youngest brother. He got sick and uh, got cancer, and and he battled that for 10 years and was in remission for about 4.5, 5 years after he went through terrible radiation and all that stuff. And then a year before he passed, we lost my mother-in-law. And so we went through that. And then we just had this series of loss. We were on our way to my mother-in-law's funeral, and we get a call on the tarmac. We're in the airplane that our horse is colicking. And so they had to put our horse down. Mm. And then our dog died of cancer. And then another dog got run over. Mm. And, we were experiencing all its loss. But then my brother passed.
Yeah.
And we're coming up on now the third anniversary of his passing, which is December. And it was as much, we miss him terribly. Even now there's days where we have tears because we wish he was here and we miss him. But we have this hope that, and this assurance that we'll be together again. And that brings us a lot of joy. And so it's not like we didn't look at it as though, oh, this is the end. It's over. That's it. We had our time with him and it's gone, or time with Carrie's mom, but it's not the case. And our faith also was so important, and also being surrounded by people of faith who supported us, who also have been through challenging times. And you come to realize when you're going through grief, in the moment when it's really fresh, you feel like you're the only one in the world who's feeling this immense weight and burden of loss and pain and grief. And then you start to realize, wow, there's millions of people going through this every single day, and myriad of reasons. I know people. I have friends who've lost kids in car accidents and all kinds of tragedy. And I don't want to dwell on the tragic things, but this world, as we talked about earlier, it has a lot of sorrow. It has a lot of joy, and it has a lot of sorrow. And I can say for us, our faith has been the most important thing, navigating this time of grief and feeling this comfort from God that sometimes comes just through his presence, other times through the presence of a friend or a family member, a hug, a kind word, a gesture of bringing meals over. It can be, or just having a conversation with somebody else who's been through the same thing. You find comfort in that too. Yeah. Not that because, misery loves company. It's just that people have been through and are going through difficult times. Yeah. And then God uses us in turn to be there for other people.
Yes. It's the problem of pain, right? It's the problem of pain that exists with our, it's the Christian problem, where you get that question, which is like, well, if there's such a good and loving God, why does he allow, bad things to happen to good people, young kids dying, people that were in their prime of their life, why they get taken down? And there's not an easy answer to it. But in the middle of all of this, there are a couple of things which I have discovered to be true. I know that you've discovered it for yourself, is even in the midst of this pain, that God says, I know what you're going through. And not only do I know what you're going through, Jesus has gone through it as well for you.
Yes. Yes.
It's a thing that's always going through my mind. We're all, and I've said this before in our groups, we're all on our way to our individual Calvaries. Each of us, we're each on this. We're on this path that's there. We are not going into uncharted territory. We're going into territory in which Jesus went ahead of us for all of it and understands all of it. And it can be so challenging. I can understand how people that don't have this belief or can't understand this, how they can look at this and just go, I don't understand how you can love this all-loving and powerful God that does these things. And the fact is to realize his plan is greater than anything that I have. And exactly one of the things that you just touched upon, this beauty and love that is interweave within the sorrow to help us get through the pain, right? The fellowship or the care that we give to other people, or the opportunities for us to be able to step into service, right? Um, I saw it happen with my father-in-law. My father-in-law passed away, where I saw, my brother-in-laws step into that role, or Kate step in that role of having that service, or seeing my father-in-law, who was, an independent guy and a go-getter, kind of, realizing, I have to accept this. I have to accept this service that other people are giving to me, in the middle of it. And this strange beauty that happens even in the midst of this pain. And that thing that you just talked about, Eric, I mean, I remember Kate saying that specifically the day, the day that her dad died, of just like looking around and just going, how are, how are people going on with their lives today? How are people going on with their normal activities, right? Because you just feel like the entire world should stop. And yet in the midst of it, God is saying, I know that you're going through this, and and I love you through this. And how all of this is going to turn out will be revealed. But in this moment, in this pain that you're dealing with, I'm right here by your side, and I'm right with you as you're going through this.
Yeah.
Because as
And
Jesus,
and I and I understand. I mean, what religion other than Christianity where God suffered for our sake,
yes,
um, and brutally.
yes,
People, if you really delve into the process of crucifixion, what they put him through, it's brutal. And the fact that he was perfect, he didn't do anything wrong, and yet he suffered because that was the plan. And God understands our pain.
yes,
And and you know what? And there are times, and a lot of times, when bad things happen, people say, "I just don't understand why bad things happen to good people," or whatever. This common line you hear from people, and a lot of times it's like, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. I don't understand it sometimes. We ask it often. Why did this horrible thing happen to this good person? Um, but what I do know is that God is conforming us to be more like his son.
yes,
And that does come through suffering.
yes,
Growth comes, my wife gave a talk, because my wife makes silver, and she makes silver jewelry. And so she fires the silver clay, and she goes through this whole process. And the in order to see the beauty of the silver, it has to be pressed and it has to be fired. And then after that, when the dross comes off, there's still a process of just polishing it and working. It doesn't just come out of the fire and it's like, oh, it's great, it's
yes,
beautiful. But then it requires refining and touching. and
yes,
and so even though when we come to Christ, we go through these fires, we're still being we're still growing, we're still
yes,
learning in our life. And none of us like suffering. We try to avoid it at all costs.
yeah,
But when you get to this place where you can accept that it's part of life
correct,
and be open to it all,
yeah,
then there's a beauty in that you can grow even in the really painful times and go. And there have been times where many times where I've thanked God for really painful things. And I said,
yes,
Lord, I don't know what you're doing, but thank you. I love
yes,
you. I know you care. And 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 then there's been times where I've made the mistake. It's like, oh, he's punishing me.
mm,
Now, I think there's a difference between punishment and discipline.
well,
And I can tell you, I know there are times that God has disciplined me. And how does he do that? Some ways that I know is sometimes he removes
yeah,
things that I want.
yeah,
And it's like, well, why did you remove that? And it's like, oh, I know, because it was my ego was getting big, or that was becoming an idol
yes,
to me. Or, boy, it sure was taking a lot of my attention away spending time with you, Lord, you know? And you know what I mean? And
dude, it's so true.
yeah, and I'm all of a sudden I'm looking at things in the world thinking, oh, I got some dough in the bank account. Things are pretty, and it's like, He's like, no, I want all of you. I want all of you. And so, like you brought up going on a hunting trip or a fishing trip, and we've done those. I went, went fishing with John Crane a few weeks ago, one of the guys in our group, and we had a great time of fellowship and spending time out in God's creation. It was awesome, and those things are great. But again, when they become idols,
Correct.
like, oh, if I can just travel to this place, life will. But what I love about travel, and it's travel's humbling in this sense. You can go on a great trip, but as soon as it's over and you got to deal with customs and flight delays and all this stuff coming back, you get home back to you got to take the trash out, and you got problems at work, and right. and all that bliss of vacation is gone. So you enjoy it at the moment. Yeah, but then it's just gone, and you think, man, that's why I can't hang my hat on those things. No. They grow wings and they're gone, And so
you really have to look at those moments of, and I've done this over the years, just realized like, hey man, that's like birthday cake or pie or something like that, right? It's like, but you can't have birthday cake every single day, right? Like you can't have it all the time. And I get it. There's a part of our human flesh life that just goes, oh, that's so good. I love that. And really what it is just like, you're right, but it's a taste. And I loved all that stuff that you're talking about the discipline and the pain. I'm a huge fan of Dave Goggins, right? Like Dave Goggins, listen, his mouth was come on, he's former Navy SEAL. What are you going to do, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But I will tell you, if there's one guy that I've seen over the last several years that has really communicated this idea of like, stop trying to cocoon yourself in comfort. Stop trying to search for this thing which isn't real, is not, of just like, well, I just want to get to my happy place in my life, or I just want to be at a point where everything's great, and then that's not biblical at all. It's not even promised, right? Jesus didn't do it. All the great saints that we know, it's not the case. And it's exactly, our process is about going through the refining, the pain, the storms, the things that we're going through, and going, all right, Lord, and something happens when we grow deeper in that relationship with him, that we start having an understanding of what this stuff is that's coming, and go, got it. I'm in a season. Something's happening here.
Yeah.
Something's being stripped away. Something's being refined. All of this stuff.
And you have to be open and not you can't resist it. Because when you're open to it, that's where you learn. That's where you grow. And, I'll tell you, I'm having to make I'm in a process at this point in my life where I'm healing wounds with my daughters and my wife, because I wanted everything to be pain-free and comfort and no problems, and all that comes out of an insecure place of, what are other people going to think? Or it's the classic example of your kids throwing a tantrum, and it's like, calm down, what are you doing? You're on an airplane, because everybody's eyes are on you, and all you can hear is people's thoughts. Oh, can they just quiet that kid down? You know what I'm saying? And so then what we end up doing is getting mad at the baby who's having a tantrum on an airplane, instead of knowing that they just need nurture. They're like, I know it's hard to be my wife had this great line. She used to say, I know it's hard to be a baby. I know it's hard to be a baby. It's like, God bless her, because I was kind of that way, where there were things that I did where I was making it more about me instead of my children and my wife, who needed me to be empathetic and compassionate and not worry so much about what other people are thinking. So, we don't always get it right, but thank God for his grace and mercy, and for forgiveness. And if we have a chance to fix those things, it's great. And
that's part of the process, buddy.
Yeah.
Eric, I'm going to tell you, I don't think it can get any
done. We're not done, are we?
I'm just going to tell you, it's one of those things where I just think, like, how can I get any better than that with the stuff that we just talked about right there? You know what I mean? Let me ask you this. If there's any closing thoughts that you have for somebody that's like going through, particularly, I know that there's a number of people that are watched that have dealt with the loss of someone very close, someone in their family, son, daughter, any of that stuff. Uh, I know that you don't have all of the answers, but based on your experience, what's some of the what's a closing thought that you would love to leave with those people that are watching and listening right now?
That that one I understand because I've been there, been through it, not more than once. But more importantly, God understands, God knows, and knows our pain, and his heart breaks with ours. And people, I know they question. It's like, well, then why does he allow it to happen? And those are the questions that sometimes I don't know what the answer is, but I can tell you that he is real and wants to be in relationship with you and be there to bring comfort during these difficult times. Because let's face it, it's the reality of life. Since the beginning of time, there is loss, there is pain, there is joy, all of it. And he wants to be a part of all of it. And God is so big. There's enough of him to go around for 8 billion people,
Um,
you know? And and I always tell people, before you write God off, just just pray and be open and just say, okay, God, if you're real, show yourself to me, reveal yourself to me, show me, because I'm having a real hard time right now believing that you even, there's those moments where people are like, my brother went through that. He was out there in pouring rain at Nashville, Tennessee at night. He knew he was going to eventually lose his family. His family was going to lose him, young daughter and his wife and his friends. And he had a huge impact on people there. And he would go outside and have these yelling matches with God. Why? And I know he's not the only one. You read throughout scripture. But what I would say to people out there is that it's hard. And I would never diminish, and everybody's experience is different. Um, but God is real and he wants to be there for us to help us get through it. And then at some point, you're going to be there for somebody else because you've been there, you've experienced it, and you're going to be able to. And it's really important to know Christ. It's the most important thing. So we can spend eternity with him and those who've gone before us.
Amen. So, so good. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. Uh, guys, do yourself a favor. Eric was in a movie recently. It was about Joe Kennedy, who is the high school football coach. That he'd go out in the center. He'd go out center field after games, and he'd kneel down and pray. And it was a huge thing that ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. They made a movie about it, and Eric is in it playing Joe Kennedy. Does an outstanding job with his co-star Amy Acker in it. It's called Average Joe. You can find it at averagejoemovie.com. Here, let's get on the old glasses there.
Yeah, and it's streaming on a bunch of places.
There it is. It's right now. You can find it at Fandango at home, Xfinity, YouTube, Spectrum, Prime Video, Apple TV, DirecTV. Go take a look. And also, at the time that we air this, you got a new Hallmark movie. I know there's a whole bunch of people that watch this that just go, oh, they love their Hallmark movies. You got a new one that's out. It's To Have and To Holiday, correct?
Yeah,
just come out.
Yeah, it's coming out on November 24th. And then you'll see it throughout the Christmas season. And I will tell you, I was doing a Hallmark movie in Connecticut, and I was at a restaurant with my producer, Dustin, and we were sitting there and we struck up a conversation with these two girls that were friends. They were having dinner and they asked us what we were doing there. We said, we're doing a Hallmark movie, and both of them teared up. and it was during the COVID time when there was a lot of, it was really hard to do production and stuff, but we were doing it. And they both said the reason they teared up is one was a teacher and one was a nurse, and they both have difficult jobs, and especially during that time. And they said, when we can come home and just sit down and watch a Hallmark movie, it just brings us so much joy during some pretty difficult times. And so it felt good to be a part of these movies that really make a difference in people's lives.
I'm so glad you do. You've directed a couple of them as well, correct?
Yeah, I've done 5. Yep.
Wow. God bless you, buddy. Amazing.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, I love them. They're so fun, and the people that are involved are just wonderful people, and it's such a joy. Yeah.
Great. So check it out. Check it out on Hallmark Channel. His latest one is out now to have into holiday. Check it out on schedule over the Hallmark Channel or on demand. I'm sure that you'll be able to find it over there. Eric, super grateful to have you on the show, buddy. Thank you, man. Such a huge
Thanks for
blessing.
having me, man.
Of course.
I love you, brother, and I'll see you soon.
You bet. You bet. Hey, thanks for joining us here on the show. Please, if you like this video, like, subscribe. We'll get more interviews like this with people like Eric and those people that have gone through those challenges with Christ's help. Thanks so much for watching us, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.